Hi, welcome to One Eye on the Page. Scott, this is going to be a 5-year battle, Stephen King, years 1989 to 1993. 5-year battle! We're going to start off with a book that is not a Bachman book, but was somewhat a Bachman book. It's The Dark Half. It's about a writer who kills off his pseudonym so that he can write books that he wants to, and the pseudonym won't stay dead. Perhaps I I read something about somebody asking if Stephen King would ever write a slasher book, which slasher films aren't particularly great because unless you just want to see the gore, but if you care anything about characters, not much there. But if he does have a slasher book, this is probably it. Probably one of his most violent books. I don't particularly care for the main character, and I don't know that Stephen King did either, based on his sort of appearance in a future novel. Obviously, it's going to be number one for now because it's the only book, but I don't know that it's going to hold up particularly well. It's just too dark for me, and I don't care enough. I don't mind dark novels, but I have to care. Like, I think The Long Walk by Bachman is a dark novel, and it's a dystopian, depressing novel, but I care. And I just don't particularly care about any of the characters in here. So it's going to be here for right now. Then we have a book that, much like I discussed in the last series, whether or not I should include certain books. This is The Stand, complete and uncut. Obviously, we already had The Stand. This has, I believe, roughly 400 more pages. Includes a lot of stuff that was cut from the first book. Some that perhaps shouldn't have been. Some that probably should have been. There is a chapter in there after Captain Trips, the superflu, has taken out most of the population, about survivors who don't make it to Boulder or Las Vegas because even though they didn't die from Captain Trips, something else killed them. And that's one of my favorite chapters, actually. It's like these short little stories about what happened to these characters, and I love that. And there's also expanded coverage of the Trash Can Man. There's additional stuff that just probably doesn't need to be in there. What I probably dislike most about this was King's decision to update it from the early 70s to the 90s. I think I understand the desire to do that, but I don't agree with it. And to me, that brings it down just a little bit. There are chapters in here that I will read again, but if I'm going to read the entire book, I'm probably going to read the 1978 version. So it's obviously going to go above the dark half for now, but we'll see if we'll get another number one from a version of The Stand. Needful Things. The Last Castle Rock story. It is not the last Castle Rock story. I'm just telling you right now. It's a mess, but it's a beautiful mess. It's all over the place. The devil opens up a shop in Castle Rock. That's essentially it. And he causes havoc because, well, that's what devils do. I love characters in here. One of them, Sheriff Alan Pangborn, who did appear in the Dark Half. And we find out what happened to Tad Beaumont in here. That's just a little spoiler for people who have read the Dark Half. This is nearly 700 pages, and it's just people acting crazy, and it's wonderful. I don't read this book perhaps as much as I should have, but when I do read it, it's just an enjoyable trip. It's not my favorite of Stephen King's books, but it's just a fun ride whenever you take it. I don't think I can rank this above The Stand. So I'm going to rank that below The Stand. Nightmares and Dreamscapes, which is another short story collection from King, and his short story collections uh, are getting longer and longer. This one's over 800 pages. I think perhaps even more so than Skeleton Crew, that this one is all over the place. You got Dolan's Cadillac, which is a revenge story. The Night Flyer and Popsy, which are both vampire stories in their own way. Chattery Teeth, which is just a fun read. You should definitely read it. Dedication, which is a disturbing read. And I don't know if I could tell you if I like it or not. I think I do, but I'm not sure. The moving finger is it's just a strange story about a really long finger. You know they got a hell of a band. I didn't like that one. Didn't like it at all. Home Delivery, I can't remember at all what that story is about, which perhaps says something. Sorry, Right Number is a teleplay. It's okay. It's okay. The 10 o'clock people did. I believe this is written at a time when King is either has just stopped smoking or is trying to stop smoking. So it's about the 10 o'clock people who are the ones who go out at 10 o'clock and are smoking. Crouch End is set in England. It's definitely got a nice English feel. I didn't particularly care for the story's resolution. This is one of those ones where you kind of go, Stephen King doesn't know how to write an ending, and it's like, yeah, he does, but maybe not this one. The Fifth Quarter is a crime story. The Doctor's Case, I love that because it's a Sherlock Holmes story, but it's mainly about Dr. Watson. And I love Dr. Watson. If you don't know that, please go listen to the I'll Be Dash podcast I do with Robin for Mike at Riken, which has nothing to do with Sherlock Holmes, but I still mount quite a defense of Dr. Watson. And Head Down is a nonfiction essay about his son, Owen, who is a published writer on his own, his little league baseball team, which it's a great little nonfiction piece. Brooklyn August, which is also about baseball, but it is a poem. There are a few standouts here, generally more middle of the pack, and a few stinkers. As far as how this goes, I'm going to rank it above the Dark Half, but below Needful Things. Next, we have The Dark Tower, Book 3, The Wastelands. The drawing of the three wastelands in Wizard and Glass are all amazing. We can have a good old debate, and we shall, about Song of Susanna and the Wolf Sakala and The Dark Tower, Book 7, which is perhaps one of his most controversial books as far as whether people like it or don't like it. But The Wasteland is great, not only for the continued tales of Roland, Eddie, and Susanna, or Susan, or Adetta, or all three, but a character comes back and we also get introduced to Oi. And if you don't know who Oi is, you should. Oi is good. And Blaine the Mono. And perhaps Ultimate Silliness, one of my favorite, I'll say battles, because battles can mean many things, is between Eddie and Blaine the Mono. Just I love that section, which also continues in Wizard and Glass. This is a difficult one. Is it number 2 or is it number 3? Could be number 3 because it's Dark Tower 3, but I think it's better than Needful Things. Now, if you're not a Dark Tower fan, you probably put Needful Things ahead of this. But I am a Dark Tower fan, so I am going to put it in the number 2 slot for now. Next, we have Four Past Midnight, which is King's second novella collection. Like Different Seasons, this is 4 novellas. Unlike Different Seasons, all 4 of these have horror elements in it. In different seasons, it was mainly the breathing method that had horror elements. The Langolier is cheesy as hell. Man, I love it. If you've seen the miniseries, it's okay, but the novella is great. Then you have Secret Windows, Secret Garden, which is another story about a writer. It just doesn't do as much for me as most of his stories about writers. There's also a movie for that starring, I believe, Johnny Depp. I've never seen it myself. I wouldn't call it bad. It's just, if you did like the tier list, it probably be one of those ones that was in the middle. The Library Policeman is not most people's favorite. I love it. I understand why people perhaps don't. Perhaps partly because of the topic, and also if you haven't read this and you plan on doing it, there's a little bit of a trigger warning on that story. But I love it. I love the characters. I love the idea of a library policeman, and I also don't love the idea of a library policeman. That's my favorite from this collection. I would not put it at the same level of perhaps three of the novellas in different seasons, but it's real close. It's real close. It wouldn't make sense thematically for me, but if you had Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption, The Body, The Breathing Method, and The Library Policeman, to me, that would be the perfect novella collection. That Pupil is great. I just don't enjoy it as much as other people do. Oh, also in here is the Sundog. I forgot about it. Perhaps that says something about it. It's another one. It just it I almost could say I couldn't put it on a tier list because I barely remember it. I know it's about a kid who gets a Polaroid. What are those if you don't listen to Outcast songs? And it has a picture of a dog on it that each time you take a picture, it moves closer and closer and closer. It's probably the worst novella in here. Like I said, I don't know if it's necessarily bad, but it's not memorable. I will definitely tell you that. So, mainly on the strength of the Library of Policeman and to some extent Langoliers, I'm going to place this above Nightmares and Dreamscapes. I just think Nightmares and Dreamscapes has so many low level stories that this goes above it just a little bit. Now we have Gerald's Game. When I first saw this, and I know Stephen King's history with writing women, I was hesitant. Even, being fairly young at the time, I had seen King wasn't always the best at writing women. It's about a woman who is at a cabin with her husband. They're having sex games, handcuffs and all. Gerald has a heart attack and dies, and she's still in her handcuffs. So the novel is basically about her escaping and about her thinking back on her past. And quite honestly, I enjoyed that part, and I think, and people may disagree with that. I think he showed that he can do a good job of writing women here. My problem with Gerald's Game is that I feel like Stephen King felt like he had to add elements to it that he really didn't. There's an element of danger in here from an outside source that I felt that I don't think we really needed. Also, as with the Library of Policemen, and to some extent the next book that I got coming up, there's a trigger warning for this. Read with caution, depending on experiences you have had or things that make you discomforted. Gerald's Game, I believe I am going to rank between the two collections, just under Four Past Midnight and just above Nightmares and Dreamscapes. The final book for 1989 through 1993 is Dolores Claiborne, which is another book about a woman. It's far superior to Gerald's Game, which it is linked to in a way, just in one scene. It is written from the point of view of Dolores Claiborne, who is giving an interview to the police after she's being questioned about somebody's death. And during the questioning about the death, she talks about a previous death that she had been accused of or thought to have done, but was never charged with. That's almost the entire novel is her talking to the police. The entire novel is like 300 pages long, and it's almost all of it is supposed to be her talking to the police in one setting, which, if anything, that's the most unrealistic thing here. Because I'm like, that's 300 pages worth of talking. That's a long time. But Dolores Claiborne is an excellent character. There is, as I said with previous couple books, trigger warning for this. That's one thing that I could ding Stephen King on, is that his books that are primarily about women always have the same type of like sexual abuse against them or that they're dealing with. And we'll see that again with Rose Matter, although that's more physical abuse than sexual, but it still plays a part. I do think, when you look at his novels in the 70s that had women in there, that the books in the 90s and beyond, he gets much better with women. And I think this is perhaps one of his best centered on a woman. And because of that, and because I previously have ranked The Stand number one in an earlier version, and I really don't like that he updated the time frame in The Stand for the uncut edition, I'm going to place this at number one. The real interesting thing that I have is I actually recorded a version of this earlier, but I messed up dates. So I included a book that wasn't in the time frame. So I have refilmed it. I don't know that taking out the book that wasn't supposed to be in there, I don't know if they're in the same order. I don't know if I film this again, if they would be in the same order. I think they would be pretty close. I think that middle area might be a little different. We had 8 books for 1989 through 1993. And coming in at number 8, The Dark Half. Coming in at number 7, Nightmares and Dreamscapes. Coming in at number 6, Gerald's Game. Coming in at number 5, Four Past Midnight. Coming in at number 4, Needful Things. Not The Last Castle Rock Story. Coming in at number 3, The Dark Tower 3, The Wastelands. Oi. Coming in at number 2, The Stand, complete and uncut. I think they should have another version of The Stand, change the time frame back to the 70s, and make it nearly complete and nearly uncut, and cut some of those chapters in there that weren't necessary. And I think that book may be number one, except I still have some issues with the original version, which I talked about. And number one for 1989 through 1993, Dolores Claiborne. So that's it for those years. We will see you next time for the years 1994 through 98.